I'm Jane Griffiths, and I live in Finnefort.
I'm Sandy Brunton, and I also live in Finnefort, but in a different place. So my grandfather got the fishing here after his lease was terminated at the Carsick fishing. So he got the lease from the Iona community from Dr. George MacLeod at Camas, and he then established the fishing here. So he's my mother's mother.
Mother's father?
Sorry, mother's father.
What brought me down to Camas was Bertie asked me if I'd like to do the fishing with him. And I came down to check it out. I was working at the petrol station at the time. The Camas fishing was well known. Bertie would be your
Uncle by marriage.
Uncle by marriage. And he'd been fishing down here for goodness knows. And most of the young men of Benesson and Finnefort had worked down here at some point or another for the summer fishing season. I thought it was great. It was great. Bertie was fantastic to work with. He didn't actually teach you anything, but you sure learnt a lot. I don't think we had roles. We did the fishing together. So there was various other people at the time. He used to fish with a lovely guy called Willie Wood from Benesson, but he was getting on a wee bit then, so they always had additional strength. So I was the additional strength. You can't fish the nets on your own. You have to have at least two people really to fish a net properly. We had 4 different nets. The point on the east, that was called the boys' net, and that was the easiest net to fish in that it had the least strain on the lines, because when the tide was running, the lines on the net would get very taut and you wouldn't be able to fish the net. You'd have to wait for the tide to drop so you could fish it. So here's Loch Scruden, and this is Camas in here. I think on that one it actually says disused, it says ruined salmon station already in 90 whatever. And here we've got the line, the original transit lines of the net that we would have lined up with the shore. I think this was lined up with Ulva. So when we dropped the anchors for the net, we'd motor out on a line on a transit and drop the anchors so that the net would always be at the right angle. You couldn't just... there was a lot of knowledge involved. Oversetting the net correctly, a badly set net would never fish. And there was another one off here. And the third one was down here. Taking the fish out the net would be the most enjoyable bit. Well, that's quite exciting. You come alongside, you're in the open, beautiful little wooden boat. We come alongside the net and you can actually see the flashes of silver of the fish swimming around in the net. So you get quite excited coming up. Then you release the pole that holds the net open. You roll your sleeves up, fight the jellyfish off, pull the net up, open the bag, and then it's quite tricky to flip the fish into the boat so they fall out of the net into the boat where they're thrashing about on the bottom. You'll be familiar with this. And then you have to
Deal with them quickly before they damage themselves in the bottom of the boat. So you give them a sharp rap on the head and that kills them. You might come along and there's no fish in the net, or you might find just a couple of heads in the net where the friendly seals already swum into the net and done your fishing for you. When the nets get dirty, by dirty we mean they get a lot of reed and algae growing on them. They don't fish well because the fish can smell them. They have to be clean. So we'd have to pull them in, bring them in, wash them in fresh water, dry them, repack them, take them out, put them back. It would take a good morning to get a net off. And then a good day, a good afternoon to wash it. Yeah.
They were made of nylon, of course, but we did have, obviously at the beginning, there were big heavy cotton ones, and there was actually big heavy cotton ones here when I was here that the Camas Centre used to use as decoration, the chapel of nets as they used to call it.
So it would be outside, so it'd be hanging up, and you would hit it in line with the net, so that it was a metal hoop. Did you have that here?
Yeah.
So
And that
with a
knocks all
hand,
the seaweed out.
with a handle, and it would work its way down the net, and so you would try. So when it was dry, then it would crinkle off. But when it was damp, it would be very difficult to get it off the net. So as the water would warm up, the algae would grow more as the season got later, and you had to change the nets more regularly, and it was a huge job just keeping the nets clean.
Seal hole there. It's particularly round. It's just the little shape they would make if the seals made holes.
Oh, really?
You can just imagine it. And then sneaking through that hole.
And the seals would just bust.
Look at that. That looks like a
They would
typical
just
seal
bust
hole.
straight through it because they would just have the power to just go. So if there's a big load of jellyfish came in on the tide and got into the head, the bag head, the weight of the jellyfish and the strain on the net because of the tide on the jellyfish, it would pull the net down. So it would be masses of weight that was actually inside the net that you would sometimes need to spend an hour or 2 hours getting the jellyfish out.
You'd be leaning over the net.
Because they could sometimes even sink the buoys. So it would be under the water.
So once your net's set, you've got to be out there looking after it.
Yeah.
You can't just put it out and forget about it.
So I would have been here off and on through the summer with various cousins, mostly hanging about. My father worked with my grandfather for quite a period of years as well. So there was 3 cousins that were all about the same age, so we would all be here just making a pest of ourselves. But it never felt that we were a burden. Our grandfather and our Auntie Anne always made it feel as if we were welcome and looked after us and paid attention to us, and always made us feel as if we were being useful, whatever we were doing.
Our job was to, when we would hear the boat coming, we would go down and watch, and Sandy's father would put his arm up for the number of boxes that we were to bring down empty to the boat. So we had to watch the boat, and he gave us the signal by raising his arm however many boxes he wanted down.
Yeah, it just felt a really comfortable place to be.
I inherited, when I took the fishing over, I inherited quite a few relatives that would come down every summer and assist. Oh, they were good assistants. And your dad actually used to come down
do the anchors of the boats.
And sit on the point
Yeah.
for an afternoon occasionally,
Yeah.
watching the net for us.
The fish would be packed up in the boxes. It would be the boat would go round to Benesson in the afternoon, and if the tide was right, you would go into the village because you could nip into the hotel and get a half pint. I remember John Cooper and I did that. Both of us probably underage, I suspect, so that was a big event, getting your half pint. And then if the tide wasn't right, you go into the big pier, and we would go on the bus. And the bus complained after a while that the juice was coming out into the luggage compartment. So eventually plastic had come in, and a plastic sheet went into the bottom of the box to stop the juice coming out. But then it would go to Oban, and as far as I know, there was a fish train went overnight down to London, I think it would go, because I think the fish was sold mostly originally in Billingsgate.
Yeah.
And eventually I think it may be, and it was WS uncles and Robbie uncles, there was various politics who bought this stuff.
Yes.
But Glasgow eventually.
But you know what was really interesting was that at that time, to employ a woman full-time to do that work was very, it felt perfectly usual and natural, but in some places it just wasn't at all.
Oh, exactly. But he had a very good, anybody who was sort of saying, was implying there was something wrong, he would always just say that he learnt to fish off his wife. His wife taught him to fish, Annie taught him to fish, and there was no answer to that. And then he'd say great things about, which is the best one I've ever had. Because there's more to fishing than just brute strength. There's a lot of technique.
And knowing where to put the nets. It's great.
It was great. He was a great... he did my social standing no end of good.
So here we have quite a few diaries going way back to the 1940s of my grandfather's, when he was fishing for salmon at Camas. And this here's an example of one from 1954. That's 68 fish altogether. There's three boxes. I can't make out where they were going, but that's a very good day's fishing. 68 fish on the one day. And there's the one that's going to Iona. 4 boxes. These diaries are full of the records of the salmon, the grilse and sea trout that was caught. And there's one there, 20 grilse, 2 boxes, and they're going to Iona. I assume it's the hotels in Iona, because of transport difficulties back then, it was easier to sell the fish locally. My Aunt Anne actually was the accountant, and she counted up the money at the end of the week and did the books. So she was very much a great organiser and a big part of the business, and she worked hard at the salmon fishing with her father. It's just amazing, and it's really nice to have all those diaries in the family. The records of salmon fishing, which is sadly it's not with us now. So yeah, it's a great record, and it's a piece of important social history, I think. Yeah.
As the years progressed, the fishing got less and less, and it became less and less economically viable. So the timing for fishing got more and more restrictive.
Because then it was down to, you had to get them off by Friday evening. You couldn't fish on a Saturday.
No, but that's a salmon box, because there's the hinged end. Goodness.
So when it came to an end, obviously there was nothing to do with the nets, so they just stayed here and became history.
Yeah, it became history.
It's only so long you could read about your occupation being history before you realise that in fact it is.
The deep, mysterious blue, lapping and crashing against the shore, dancing the tangle back and forth, crash, crash, crashing against the crooked rocks. Hauling the creels back on the boat, the fisherman's glove grabs the rope, reflecting on the pulling tide, crash, crash, crashing against the crooked rocks. As the seals sleep, the dolphins leap, herons head home while whales weep. Salty sea spray fills the air, crash, crash, crashing against the crooked rocks.
My gran was from Easdale, and Peter Islet's the salmon fishing rights there. I was between school and college, I'd asked for a job a few times, but there's loads of folk I never got on. Then I'd actually got a job with the forestry for the planting trees for the summer, and he phoned up and said, "Do you still want a job?" So I said yes. So I never went to the forestry, and so that's how I went. He asked me to come here for Tushkin for a few weeks. I went to Tushkin and then over to Easdale and worked and come back. And I did a wee bit of his father was alive as well. He did a wee bit of lobster fishing, so I was doing a wee bit of that. And it really sort of started there. And it really just picked up as you went along. Now, Neil Carman, he'd been doing it probably about a year more than me. And we worked together, and then for Peter on wee boats, then he went his own way.
I didn't have a clue about fishing till I was 19. Even though I lived here, I'd never been at sea, I don't think, apart from going to Oban. When I was there, we had about 10 nets, I think. So that was quite a lot compared to Bertie, who had maybe 3, and Tom Brunton at Carsig probably had 3 as well. So it's quite a bit bigger. We fished lobsters through the winter, so I was full time. But the salmon season was just 3 months maybe. The rest of the year we went lobster fishing. So I learnt it there.
And I stayed with Peter a good few years longer, till I thought I should be doing this for myself, and I plucked up the courage. We were working out Bendoran, and I thought I'm going to have to go and see him. So I went over and I said, "Oh, I've got something to say." He said, "Oh, come in." And I said, "Oh, you're not going to like it." And he said, "Oh, what is it?" I said, "I'm leaving, I'm going to go mowing." He said, "Good." And it just deflated me, and he said, "It's the best thing you can do." He said, "The job's always here for you, but you need to do it." And he was so nice about it, he was so good.
No, Peter was great. He was the best boss anybody could ask for, really.
No, but he was good. He told me a lot. He was a good man, nice man.
My name is Roger Harvey and I live in Finnefort. I first experiences were going out with an old boy in Benesson in an 11-foot dinghy and fishing a few single creels, and with him I caught my first lobster, and his name was Peter John McAllister. Peter John was born up Loch Screedon in an encampment at Kilpatrick. His father was a horse trader from Ireland, but also fished herring. Well, he taught me an awful lot of things, but to do with the fishing, he taught me how to handle a small boat, how to strip down a seagull engine, and the greatest thing was he taught me how to mesh a net and make creels. And being able to mesh a net came in quite useful later on when I was working with trawl nets and things like that. They get ripped, although I'm no great expert at them, but I can struggle by. He was very knowledgeable, and he was very knowledgeable in a small boat as well. He was highly respected, because he always dropped off. If he caught any fish, he always dropped them off round the village. So he was always doing something as well. He had a big wheelbarrow with a metal wheel on it, so you knew he was coming.
I was born just immediately after the Second World War, and there was really no money in shellfish fishing. The salmon fishermen were the wealthy fishermen in my young day. And I know when my father came back home from the war, he couldn't make a living at fishing, and yet my grandfather before that had. He'd made a very good living at it. And then the war came along, and of course, just like it's happening just now, a wee bit, things are getting in turmoil. So there was no record of shellfish or fishing, full stop, on Iona until I started, after I left school. There was no competition. You took that price or no price. And then, in fact, just 6 weeks ago now, I was down in Fleetwood at a funeral, or a memorial service actually, because the person had died during COVID, and that was for Andrew Wilson of Holyhead, major buyer and up this west coast out onto Eust. When he came onto the scene, that made a big difference because that was competition then.
Aye.
And then Terry Massey, he comes onto the scene, so on it goes. So competition.
David Town, and then David Lindsay thereafter.
Aye, David Lindsay.
From Oban.
You know Spank?
Yes.
Well, Spank was in school with Alistair in Cliabh, you know.
Aye.
And I could see that there was no great living to be made, continuous living at lobsters alone. So we had to push to see if we could get a crab market started. And Big Ian MacDonald, Ian Jondon, Torramore, he had friends that worked for Young's Seafood. And through that and a whole lot of different connections, we got in tow with the factory up in Inverbervie, Stonehaven. So Alistair and I took a sample of the crabs away up there in the transit van. And
$10.5 for crabs for free. All we asked the manager fella was, process them and tell us that it's poor crab before we leave. We challenged him to. And we went and had a wee tour about and a bite to eat and came back up, and by that time they'd sorted through it all. They'd put it to the front of their production line, they'd sorted through everything, had a look at it and said, that's the best crab we've had this year. You must have been ruthless in your selection. And we looked at each other and said, no, that's the crabs that we catch. Oh, West Coast crab's never as good quality as that. I said, well, that's what we catch.
That was us. This was it just starting, the crab fishery. This is us. So out of that, because he had been in school with Spank, then we employed Spank with a tipper lorry, because that's what he was starting out in his haulage business. And he was no pier for the big boats in Finnefort in those days, because there was no modern pier there. So we happened to land him in Essen every 2 days. And then we'd load Spank up, and he would go away up to Inverbervie and so on. So we did very well at that eventually. Yeah.
But the other thing it did, which I think is very significant, was for the Ross and Mull. It kept a generation of young fellas there, David.
Aye, it did, yep.
The starting of that crab fishing kept, I don't know how many.
Aye, quite a few anyway. Aye.
Well, there's 2 or 3 families dependent purely on the transport side of it, never mind the catching side of it.
Because it all changed very quickly.
Yep. Aye.
I don't really know. I don't know. I wouldn't say it really has changed an awful lot. We still buy and sell. I mean, electronics has made it easier, and we can go further. The electronic charts and the depths are there, and the hardness of the seabed and everything, so you can just see, go over the ground once, and your plotter will plot everything and see how hard it is, and no, you're fishing. Whereas before, likes of Davy and Iona, they used to have to take marks of their better ground, so they use the radar and just take line of sights, and that's how they found their ground. I mean, we'll go 20 miles out to sea and you can't see anything, even if it's a foggy day, and you go straight to your float. It just goes with the GPS.
Well, sitting in the kitchen last year or the year before, and Alistair started fishing with me in the old boat when he was still in school. We're sitting in there, and just like this, he quotes the course and the time to get to the end of Iona Sound, and he said, you got to change course then this time to hit the Torn Rocks. I couldn't have told you that. It's in his head. Just like he quoted you the prices.
From the mooring, 12 degrees west to south. For 55 minutes, was it 55 minutes with the ebb tide and an hour and 5 with the flood against you? And then it was 17 minutes bang on due west, out to the West Reef.
Right.
That was for foggy days, no radar.
No radar.
When the fishing was at its peak, there was 40 plus people, I think, working at fishing, and they were all in their 20s, I would imagine. But now it's must be mostly in their 50s. No young ones coming into the game at all.
20 years ago, 25 years ago, that's the school. Everyone fished. I was involved in fishing. We had 3 of a crew, and all the boats had 2, 3 people on them. And that's what. There's a big school role then, but since then it has dropped an awful lot, and hardly anyone's fishing anymore. And there is still good money in it. The money's still all right, just with the market, but it's getting hard just now, just the price of fuel, and been a fairly good day today, but once I take the expenses off, it's still enough to live on, but it's not the sort of money we were getting used to. We were getting spoiled a bit, but it's still all right. But the fuel is just a killer just now. It's more than doubled in a year. It's more than doubled.
What Neil was doing, catching stuff, small scale, straight to the local market. That's the future. Interesting the way he's done it.
Yes, very much so.
He's looked at it with a very fresh pair of eyes.
Aye.
And looked at it from the market end, back the way.
Aye.
Rather than from the, now I've caught them, what do I do with them?
Aye. But in Neil's case, and a lot of those other boats, well, you've got the wee kiosks and that over in Finnefort now.
Yep.
That are doing very well, supplying that market.
An goram ddwyn David, a bwlig sa bwlig a chlatach, a dansa ash sa ryrst.
A glacadi, sa glacadi, na craig and scarra.
A tarin an Cliabh ash a vatha, Graham an iascar an rob. Meorathig a bhur chlan.
A glacadi, sa glacadi, na craig and scarra.
At sa vis na ron a chatal, Lame na lamatarin. At sa vis muchgan vada a cúnaig, chili a chora griach. Smooch na mara sanad.
A glacadi, sa glacadi, na craig and scarra.
Well, Johnny was a fisherman and a waiter in his spare time, what little he had. I was a chef, and people would come and ask, where can we get fresh seafood? And we'd have to tell them, well, nowhere really. It goes straight on a truck and goes to Spain. Of course, we always ate fresh. I got fresh lobster. Johnny cooked me a lovely 3-course dinner involving lobster for our very first meal. So our future was assured. But we thought, well, that's a shame. And why not, it was Johnny's idea, why not start a restaurant in our sort of abandoned old croft building? We decided, well, wouldn't it be great? It should take about 6 months, I figured, to get it up and running. And Johnny says, oh, I think it's going to be a year or 2. I said, oh, you're so pessimistic. And it was 7 years to get funding and find a builder. And you know how it is around here. But yeah, coming in with unknown buckets of weird things, it is a challenge. And spider crab lately, that's our latest one. What can we do with all this crab that nobody sells, eats, buys? And I just thought, well, Johnny thought we could use it somehow. So we are processing it, but it takes a couple extra hours out of our day. So it is challenging from the time perspective, but seafood always has been labor intensive on the processing front. But it's also exciting though, to have sea urchin come in, and one day Johnny will have like 3 octopus. It's always fun to see what he comes into the kitchen in his special magical bucket full of fun. But you like the mackerel.
Oh, I love mackerel.
And you love the
fresh
creamy
mackerel is unbeatable.
Pernod spinach with the scallops, the Isle of Mull scallops on top with
I like the whole lot, but
Pernod
my
sauce.
favourite is without doubt the crab.
Yeah, but you can taste when food is made with love and when there's soul into it, and I think you got to cook a dish.
Winter time, a Sunday breakfast treat is hot buttered croissants with smoked lobster scrambled eggs.
Yes, please, as you said.
I mean, you can only have to look at the number of folk that are doing seafood since we started. We've got the Creel started down there, the Keel Rose trying to do some seafood now, and yeah, it's massively popular. Without the seafood, our tourist trade would drop away. I mean, you only have to look at the queues outside Oggie's shack in Oban and to realise what a fantastic draw it is. And it's top quality stuff. I can see why there's no youngsters particularly keen to start the fishing, because it's bloody hard work. It is excruciatingly hard work some days, and it's dangerous, but the rewards are there still, you know. If you work hard, you can still earn a good living at it.
Yeah, we need more fishermen and we need more chefs, young people. In the rest of the world, chefing is the new rock star. Now, let me tell you, it's not a glamorous occupation either. It is, that's bloody hard work. And you get to work for, like, I get, 14 to 17 hour days, but I do get the winters off, so I'm not complaining. But it's a hard graft.
My first kind of introduction to fishing, I suppose, I was out in Australia and I was kind of working holiday visa out there, and I started working for a fish company out there. They owned 4 or 5 different boats, and the boats were long line boats, so they were going away out for a couple of weeks at a time, fishing for swordfish mainly. Swordfish and tuna were the 2 main ones. I didn't work on the boats, I worked just on the shore side of things, but we helped unload the boats, we helped with all the maintenance side of it. The main thing, I suppose, was when the boat got unloaded, we worked in the factory processing all these big fish, and they were getting sent mainly to Japan and America for the sushi market. I guess that was my first introduction to commercial fishing, which is strange because growing up here, there's plenty of commercial fishing boats here, but I never worked on any. I didn't do any deckhand stuff here. It was only when I came back after being abroad that there was kind of an opportunity to do something with the fishing, and I thought, well, why not? I'll give it a go and see how I get on with it. There's certain things that are kind of similar, so that started me off, I suppose. And then when I came back here, like I said, it was actually Davy Kirkpatrick that he still has it, this wee dinghy, just a wee 16-foot Orkney dinghy, lovely wee boat, but she had a licence. He wasn't really using the boat, and I said, well, would you be interested in me using it? I'll take care of the boat and look after it, make sure it's all good, and if I can kind of use it and use the licence, put stuff through the licence. And so he was happy with that, and so that's how it started when I came back to Iona. So when I first started fishing, I was going out in the Golden Dawn, which is Davy's the dinghy, and I was doing it part-time, so I was working at the hotel as well. I didn't have many creels to begin with, so I'd got a few second-hand ones. It was an open dinghy, so it didn't have a hauler in, so I was hand-hauling all the creels. There's quite a deep patch, they called the Tangle Hole, which is out towards Struthach, and it goes down to, I think the deepest bit in the chart's 150 metres. And I put a fleet of creels in there one time, and I never did it again, because to haul back up from 100 and whatever metres, it wasn't very much fun. And if I remember rightly, I don't think I got very many prawns out of it. I just started off doing it locally to businesses mainly to begin with, and then when I went full time with the fishing, that was 2015, I then started doing a wee bit more advertising. So I started actually, looking to sell to Joe Blogs off the street. Once I went full time at Delicilu, I was selling to the 2 hotels in Iona, the Heritage Centre Cafe, sometimes to the restaurant here. Started doing a bit more private sales, and that just kind of built and built. Anybody who ordered on Iona, I would always deliver whatever they'd ordered to them. I wasn't doing as much in Mull really up until, I suppose, really COVID hit, which sounds a bit strange, but basically when COVID hit, the first lockdown, I had just got my new boat, and so it took me a wee bit to get that ready to go. But then once it was, I guess because people were kind of locked down, and also the hotels here weren't open, so I wasn't really having much business. So I was looking for an outlet to sell stuff more to private folks. So I started up a text message list, like a kind of mailing list on Mull, on the Ross of Mull. Basically, I would go over once or twice a week, and folk would come down to the pier and meet me. At the same time, I bought a massive big cool box, and that's on the Iona side. And so now, if anyone orders anything on Iona, it gets put into that cool box and they come and collect it. So any orders that go to Mull, they just get dropped at the top of the pier at Finiffer, and people come down and collect them and then just return the boxes to the same place.
I have a lot of silly memories. So whenever my Uncle Peter comes up, he has like this fast boat, and whenever I go on it, it's too fast. And one time when it was my Uncle Peter's birthday, and when it was his birthday, we went to a beach and we went donutting on his boat.
My sister Ulla fell in the huge patch of seaweed and she came out with a giant crab like hanging around her neck.
Well, it's quite nice when the boat's like bobbing about and the engine's not on, because it's quite like, it's very quiet.
At one of my birthdays, we went down to the beach and I had my cousins and a friend up, and we went down, and my little sister, she was swimming around the sea, around the waves and things, and then she fell flat on her face in the actual water, and my auntie had to come and get her out.
Whenever you want, you can kind of go out, do paddle boarding, snorkeling and stuff without having to really like do much. You can just kind of go out a lot.
It's this one time which I was playing in the sea and I fell on my face and I got sand everywhere.
My dad works on a boat, my uncle works on a boat, and my Shona works on a boat.
And would you like to work at sea, do you think?
Yeah.
What would you like to do at sea?
I'd probably like to be like a fisherman.